penance and prayer, reparation for sin. Again, what is the meaning of reparation? Theologians of our time say that an old idea of reparation, which is not heretical naman, is that we console Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament. But they say theologically that is incorrect. Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament is the risen Christ. He cannot suffer. So we do not console him. So the idea of reparation as consoling the heart of Jesus now is theologically ganon. So what is reparation? Reparation is joining ourselves to the Paschal mystery of Jesus, where he offers his life, passion, death, and resurrection as a means of redemption from sin for all of us. In other words, Jesus offers his life, passion, death, and resurrection in love and adoration to the Heavenly Father, so that the Heavenly Father and he together open a way of redemption and salvation for all humanity. And reparation for sin is joining ourselves to that offering of Christ. Again, only God can really repair. Only God can really bring forgiveness. So we join Jesus in his offering of himself to the Father for us. So again, the same theology of consecration. It does not come from us. Consecration does not come from us. Reparation does not come from us. It comes from Christ. And we enter into the reparation of Christ. We enter into the consecration of Christ. Malinaw ba yun? Yun lang ang talagang kailangan natin gawing malinaw para hindi tayo magkagulo. So, he says, reparation is then understood as devoutly joining in, sharing in the Paschal mystery of Jesus, as sharing in the mission of Jesus to vanquish sin, to overcome the power of sin in the lives of human persons and in the life of human communities. So reparation then means sharing in the sacrificial and redeeming work of Jesus. And in him and through him, overcoming sin and repairing the effects of sin, repairing the effects of selfishness and injustice, of violence, as these destroy human lives in today's world. So that's the basic theological clarification that we should keep in our hearts. Everything begins with God, and everything is done in Jesus, through Jesus, and with Jesus. Not us. We enter into Jesus. We enter into the heart of Mary. The heart of Mary enters into the heart of Jesus. So, and Pope Paul VI found this formula. The most complete reparation is building up a civilization of love. He says that's the most complete reparation that can be made, that Jesus, we join Jesus in trying to build up in our midst a civilization of love. So that's the theological thing that has to be explained. And I think that's why I was asked to come here and try to explain a little bit of what the bishops are talking about. So it's very urgent. I want to, before we end, anong oras na ba? Do ka sa watch? I have no watch na. What time is it? 3:08. I've been speaking for 45 minutes. So at least in 15 minutes. It's tied up with Fatima. And let's say a few words about Fatima. You see, Pope Francis wants to consecrate his, that is, to bring, to entrust to Our Lady of Fatima his pontificate. And John Paul 5 times entrusted the whole world to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. No? Now, what is the meaning of this? when the third secret of Fatima was revealed and exposed in the year 2000 by the Congregation of the Doctrine of Faith, Cardinal Ratzinger wrote a document trying to explain the basic message of Fatima. And let me say this. First of all, he says in the Ratzinger report, there is a stern warning launched from Fatima that is directed against the prevailing frivolity, a sermon to the seriousness of life, of history, to the perils that threaten humanity. Fatima reconfirmed, but only reconfirmed, the urgency of penance, conversion, forgiveness, fasting. And he said, therefore, we did not publish the third secret, but because it would expose the church to the danger of sensationalism. There's this, those of you who follow the Fatima events, up to now, there's a very strong group or groups in the church who believe that the full third secret has not been revealed. And we don't know. We don't know. Now, many of the things that have come, for instance, the two statements of Benedict, who has read the document when he went to Fatima in 2010, say very strongly the message of Fatima is not yet finished. It's very relevant today. And he ties it up with the triumph of the Immaculate Heart, not with the event of killing the Pope, trying to assassinate John Paul II. He links it with the triumph of the Immaculate Heart that is to come. And secondly, something very surprising, he linked the crisis of sexual misconduct by priests in the church to the secret of Fatima, which was never mentioned in the document of the year 2000, but which was mentioned by others who had read the document before, that there would be some kind of an apostasy in the heart of the church. And Pope Benedict, in his address to the newspaper people at the airplane going to Fatima, says that this scandal, he's always been very strong against the sexual scandal of the clergy. He says, this is part of what the message of Fatima means. So, in his book, The Light of the World, page 165, he says, the fundamental significance of the Fatima event, he says, and the purpose of our revealing the third secret was to refer to a critical point, a critical moment in history, by which I mean the whole power of evil that came to a head in the major dictatorships of the 20th century, and that in another way is still at work today. So for Benedict, the central significance of Fatima is the rising of a power of evil in our time. That there is a massive rising of the power of evil in our time. He says it came to head in the major dictatorships, that's the Nazi dictatorship and the communist dictatorship, but he says it is still at work today. And as we said in 210, he said that the crisis of sexual evil among the clergy is part of this power of evil that is trying to destroy the church. He says the solution against the power of evil is not some great political actions. They are not the great political actions are not the answer to the power of evil, he said. The answer to the power of evil, he says this in his book, The Light of the World, can only come from the transformation of the heart through faith, hope, love, and penance. In this sense, the message is precisely not a thing of the past. Even the two major dictatorships have disappeared. The church continues to suffer, and even now there is tribulation. There is a power which tries to trample down the faith. So this secularization, this secularism power which is trying to destroy the faith, that is part of this rising up of a power of evil, which Fatima is all about. This power of evil, according to Benedict, is not limited to the Nazi dictatorship or the communist dictatorship, but to a great surge of the power of evil. There is this power which tries to destroy the faith. What we beg and pray for, that the power of evil is restrained, that the energies of good might regain their vigor. You could say that the triumphs of God and the triumphs of Mary are quiet, but they are real nonetheless. In his book on Jesus Christ, on page 44 of the first volume, he asks that question again. What did Jesus bring to the world? He did not change society. He did not give food to everybody. He did not create material well-being for the whole world. He did not cure all evils. He did not cure all sicknesses. What did he do? He says he brought the real God. What Jesus gave us was the reality of God. And he says, we do not understand how great a gift it is because we are not using the power of God. We are not bringing into our own lives the power of God so that the power of God can work through us. He says, for instance, this thing about social sins and social structures. Yes, they are, he says. We need to change social structures. That's the duty of every person, not only of every Christian, but of every human being. They have to try to create a better society, a more moral, a more fraternal, a more just society. But that is not specifically the work of Christians. The work of Christians is to bring God inside that. You see, he says, all the kingdoms that Satan offered to Jesus, all the great social institutions that Satan offered to Jesus, they're all gone. But the work of Jesus continues. And the work of Jesus, the work of the church, and he says the work of the priest, is not primarily to change social structures, but to change hearts. The work of every human being is to try to create a better world. Every human being. But the specific work of the Christian is to bring God into that work. And he says, so many in the Christian church have secularized themselves, so they're just taking part in that work of bettering society. They are no longer interested in bringing God into the work. What's the name of that former La Salette priest? Bob Garon. Bob Garon gave a talk in our seminary many years ago. He says he went to 2 seminaries, and he was told by the spiritual father in one seminary, Father, do not talk about holiness in our seminary. That is past. That's no more. Pasado. We are making priests who will change the world. Who will change society. Not holiness. That's past. And then another rector down in another seminary said, Father, don't talk about prayer and those things. What we're insisting with our seminarians is not prayer and personal holiness, but changing society. Is changing society bad? No. Benedict says it's important enough to give our lives for it, but it's not the specific work of the Christian. The specific work of the Christian is to bring God into that work. Because only when God enters into a work like that does the work endure. All the kingdoms that were offered by Satan to Jesus are all gone. But St. Francis of Assisi lived 800 years ago and his work is still going on. See? Because God is inside that work. Okay. So now he was asked, what is the meaning of this triumph of the Immaculate Heart? And here he apologizes because he says, I'm too much already of a rationalist person. He says, when he said in Fatima in 2010 that we should all hope for the triumph of the Immaculate Heart will come before 2017, he says, this is the equivalent meaning of our praying for the coming of God's kingdom. That's his interpretation. He says, this is my interpretation. This statement was not intended, I am too rationalistic, he says, to express any expectation on my part that there is going to be a huge turnaround and that history will suddenly take a totally different course. The point is rather that the power of evil is restrained again and again. And again, the power of God himself is shown in the mother's power. And the mother's power, in the mother's power, it keeps alive. So, for him, the meaning of the triumph of the Immaculate Heart is that in this century, in this period of the 20th and the 25th century, 21st century, where there is a tremendous surge of the power of evil, that the power of God, the power of good, passing through the hands and the heart of the Blessed Mother, will diminish the powers of evil and reinvigorate and give new life to the powers of good. That's his interpretation. He says it's a private interpretation. So, for him, the fundamental meaning of Fatima is that we are living in an age of a tremendous power of evil trying to destroy the faith. That must be the inspiration behind the Year of Faith. We realize that in our own country also, there is a power of evil that is trying to destroy the faith. That is trying to say, if you are modern, then give up all these old superstitions. Give up these images of the Blessed Mother and be modern. No? And he says, no. We